Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you a touching and heartwarming story about kindness, hope, and a new beginning. The story follows Tieu Hue, a poor and homeless girl whose life changed completely after a kind CEO named Tuan decided to help her. Not only did he give her a small house to live in, but he also stood by her side as they worked together to transform the empty yard into a beautiful garden full of flowers. From clearing the wild grass to planting each young flower with care, every moment reflected compassion, gratitude, and the power of giving someone a second chance. The small garden became more than just a place for flowers. It symbolized hope, dignity, and a brand new life for Tieu Hue. If this story touched your heart, please support our channel by liking the video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to our channel for more emotional and inspiring stories. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you in our next video. The morning after receiving the small house as a gift, Tieu Hue woke up earlier than usual. For a long time, she simply sat on the wooden steps in front of the house, quietly looking around at the peaceful surroundings. Just a few days ago, she had no place to stay and had to wander from place to place, unsure about what tomorrow would bring. But now, standing in front of this simple house that CEO Tuan had generously given her, everything felt like a dream. The air was fresh, the sunlight was warm, and the small piece of land in front of the house stretched quietly before her, waiting to be cared for. Although the yard was still empty and covered with wild grass, in Tieu Hue's eyes, it already held the image of something beautiful. A little later that morning, CEO Tuan came to visit to see how she was settling into the new home. When he arrived, he found Tieu Hue kneeling in the yard, gently pulling out weeds with her hands. Her clothes were slightly dusty, but her face was filled with determination and excitement. Surprised, he walked closer and asked softly, "What are you doing so early in the morning?" Tieu Hue looked up and smiled shyly before standing up. She brushed the dirt from her hands and pointed toward the empty ground in front of the house. "I want to turn this place into a small garden," she said with hopeful eyes. "If flowers grow here, the house will feel warmer and more alive." Hearing her words, Tuan looked around the yard thoughtfully. The land was not large, but it had enough space for a few rows of flowers and some small plants. More importantly, he could see the excitement shining in Tieu Hue's eyes. For someone who had once been homeless and hopeless, even a small garden could mean a brand new beginning. Without hesitation, he rolled up the sleeves of his shirt and smiled warmly. "Then let's do it together," he said. Tieu Hue was surprised. She had not expected the busy CEO to help her with such a simple task. But Tuan had already picked up a shovel leaning against the wall of the house. Soon, the quiet yard was filled with the sounds of soil being turned over and weeds being cleared away. Tieu Hue used a small hoe to loosen the earth, while Tuan removed the larger clumps of grass and stones. As they worked side by side under the gentle morning sunlight, the once messy yard slowly began to transform. The soil became softer, the ground more even, and clear spaces appeared where flowers could soon be planted. From time to time, Tieu Hue laughed softly when she accidentally dropped a tool or got dirt on her hands. Each moment felt simple but deeply meaningful. For Tieu Hue, every shovel of soil they turned felt like planting a seed of hope. This garden was not just about flowers. It was the first step toward building a new life, one where she finally had a place to belong. And beside her, CEO Tuan continued to work quietly, helping her shape that hopeful beginning. After the ground had been cleared and the soil carefully loosened, the small yard in front of the house already looked completely different. The messy patches of wild grass were gone, and neat rows of fresh soil stretched across the garden space. Tieu Hue stood in the middle of the yard, breathing slightly heavier after working all morning, but her eyes were bright with excitement. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked at the empty rows of soil as if she could already imagine flowers blooming there. Not long after, CEO Tuan returned carrying several boxes in the back of his car. When he opened the trunk, Tieu Hue's eyes widened in surprise. Inside were many young flower plants, each one carefully prepared in small pots. There were bright red roses, cheerful yellow chrysanthemums, delicate pink flowers, and even small climbing plants that could grow along the garden fence. "You really brought all these flowers?" Tieu Hue asked in disbelief, her voice filled with joy. Tuan smiled warmly. "If we're going to build a garden, we should make it beautiful," he replied. Together, they began arranging the plants along the freshly prepared rows of soil. Tuan patiently explained how to plant them properly. He showed Tieu Hue how deep each hole should be, how to gently loosen the roots before placing the plant into the ground, and how to press the soil carefully around the base so the plant could stand firmly. Tieu Hue listened attentively to every instruction. She knelt down on the soft earth, her hands moving carefully as she planted each flower one by one. She treated every small plant as if it were something precious. After placing each flower in the soil, she gently covered the roots with dirt and patted the ground softly, almost like she was protecting something fragile. From time to time, Tuan helped by digging the holes or passing her another plant from the boxes. Although he was a successful CEO used to busy offices and meetings, he worked quietly beside her without any hesitation. The sunlight filtered through the trees, shining gently across the garden, while a soft breeze carried the fresh scent of soil and leaves. When the rows of flowers slowly began to fill the garden, Tieu Hue stepped back to look at their work. The once empty yard was now full of life. Even though the flowers had just been planted, their colors already brightened the space around the house. Finally, Tieu Hue picked up a watering can and began to water the plants carefully. The clear drops of water soaked into the soil, giving the young flowers the nourishment they needed. As she watered each row, she smiled quietly, feeling a sense of peace she had not experienced for a long time. Standing nearby, Tuan watched her with a gentle expression. For him, the garden was not just a place to grow flowers. It was a symbol of a new beginning for Tieu Hue, a life filled with stability, hope, and dignity. "This garden will grow beautifully," he said softly. Tieu Hue turned to him, her eyes shining with gratitude. In that moment, she realized that the house he had given her was more than just a place to live. It was the start of a new chapter in her life, and the small garden they were building together would always remind her of that hopeful beginning. As the afternoon slowly moved toward evening, the warm sunlight began to soften, casting long golden shadows across the small garden in front of the house. After hours of working together, Tieu Hue and CEO Tuan finally stepped back to admire what they had accomplished. The yard that had once been covered in weeds and dry soil had now transformed into a peaceful and colorful space. Rows of newly planted flowers stretched neatly across the garden, their leaves fresh and bright under the fading sunlight. Tieu Hue stood quietly in the middle of the garden, holding the watering can in her hands. Her clothes were slightly dusty from the day's work, and a few strands of hair clung to her forehead, but none of that mattered. Her eyes were filled with happiness as she slowly turned around, looking at every corner of the small yard they had just created together. For a moment, she could hardly believe that this place truly belonged to her. Just weeks ago, she had been wandering the streets without a home, unsure where she would sleep or how she would survive the next day. Life had felt uncertain and lonely. But now, standing in the soft evening light, surrounded by fresh soil and young flowers, everything felt different. This little house and garden had become a symbol of hope, something she had not dared to imagine before. The flowers they had planted were still small, but their colors already brought life to the yard. The roses stood proudly in one corner, while rows of chrysanthemums lined the path leading to the front door. Near the wooden fence, several climbing plants had been carefully placed so they could grow upward and eventually cover the fence with green leaves and blossoms. Even though the garden was simple, it felt warm and full of promise. Tuan stood a few steps away, quietly observing Tieu Hue's reaction. Seeing the genuine happiness on her face made him feel deeply satisfied. For him, helping her was not about charity or recognition. It was simply about giving someone a chance to start again. Sometimes, a small act of kindness could change a person's entire future. Tieu Hue slowly walked toward him, her eyes slightly shining with emotion. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the house, but for everything today." Tuan smiled gently and shook his head. "You're the one who will make this place beautiful. I only helped a little." She looked back at the garden once more, imagining how it would look in a few months when the flowers began to bloom fully. Butterflies might visit, the air would be filled with fragrance, and the garden would become a peaceful place where she could rest after long days of work. The sun continued to sink below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. In that calm moment, the small house and the newly planted garden seemed to glow warmly under the evening light. For Tieu Hue, this was not just the end of a long day of planting flowers, it was the beginning of a new life, one built with hope, kindness, and the promise that tomorrow would be brighter than yesterday.